Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is going to be an extremely special and fast-paced, incredible stories that have accounted over the past week, and I know you guys are going to enjoy this. I really do hope you do. Tonight's first story is sent in by a guy that I've been speaking to for the past week. Wants to remain anonymous. And it's quite a story, guys. Please do let me know what you think down below in the comments. Of course, please do like and share. And without further ado, let's get into tonight's story. I'd like to entitle The Panama Woods Witch Curse. Without further ado, let's get straight into that. Hello, DMT. I really appreciate you taking the time to read this. You will be the first soul I've spoken to about these occurrences. I've been a subscriber and supporter of yours for a while now, and it has taken me quite the resolve to relive some of these moments. But basically, I've compiled coincidences from my family's past on my mother's side to try and find some answers on what I believe is happening to me. I don't know if this is desperation on my part to try and seek closure on my misfortunes, but I've tried to look at things from a rational point of view, and I can never seem to convince myself that these things are sheerly my imagination running wild. Before I get into what ails me now, let me give you my best rendition of the story my mother told me about the situation her and her family faced living in rural Panama, Central America. Though she wasn't born at the time of this specific story, she remembers the authentication of how this encounter left her parents slightly traumatized. For better understanding of my connection to my mum's side, every one of my relatives from her side still remain in Panama, save for one of her sisters who moved up to Nevada with her. They all speak mainly Spanish, and me, foolishly as a child, never taking the time to learn Spanish despite it being part of my heritage, means that I only received this story from my mother. Otherwise, I'd ask my grandpa or grandma personally, though that's harder now as days ever since my grandma passed away this year to get in touch with my grandpa. Last time I'd seen or heard from him was at her service. Sorry, this is getting long. Let me get into the story now. So it begins with where they lived. The area was Tianatas, I believe before more advanced civilization was brought in. So, they were mainly living on farmland. Now, I've been to this farm too as a child. It's very spacious and about a mile hike to a river. Well, in their community, they had about 5 neighbours spread out over a couple of miles apart from each other. And they were pretty social apparently, as word spread about a woman who lived in the forest that could shapeshift into animals and came to cause hysteria amongst the people and their livestock. She took the forms of many animals, but her favourite was a large wolf to kill their goats and cattle. One day, my grandpa was tending some crops when he saw someone approaching the barn about 50 yards or so from him. He thought this was odd because it was almost sundown and everyone would be inside already. So he decided to pursue the other. As he got about 30 yards in, the person, now more clearly visible, calmly proceeded behind the barn. So my grandpa went to cut the intruder off at the other end, but as he rounded the corner, he was greeted by a snarling wolf that then proceeded to charge at him. Apparently, it startled him so bad he fell over backwards, and with this it leapt over him and towards the tree line on the opposite side of the property with unbelievable speed. This wolf then kept coming almost daily, at first just watching from the tree line, but then it started to come closer to the barn and eventually the house. They tried their best to keep it off with traps, but it seemed too smart for them, and was never to be seen when my grandpa came to challenge it, arms in hand. One day, my grandpa arrived at the scene of all of his goats slaughtered and piled up in a corner of their pen, and was completely and utterly fed up. Just an animal or not, he decided to call it out, yelling at the tree line all sorts of curses and threats. That night, he awoke to his daughter screaming and a loud banging at the front door, accompanied by frenzied snarls and scratches. He acted immediately, grabbing his rifle and going out to the back door and around the house towards the beast. He took aim but hesitated, then resolved himself further and shot it in the leg, causing the wolf to scream out in pain, but not that of an animal scream, but more like a wounded woman. He said it looked at him with such overwhelming hatred before saying something to him in Spanish, standing up and running again at blinding speeds, despite the leg injury back towards the tree line. The only reason he hesitated apparently is because at first glimpse, in the near pitch black, it had the silhouette of a person crouched over. A few weeks after that encounter, and my grandpa reportedly seen an old lady, similar to that of the person he had seen on his property, walking with a limp down a trail in the same leg he had shot. To this day, neither me nor my mother know exactly what it is that it said to my grandpa, but he thinks it was some kind of curse, because he says a lot of bad things happened afterwards that were quite unexplainable. Sudden crop deaths, pet and livestock sickness, and other misfortunes. My mum's sister, the oldest of her siblings, the one who was awoken to the noises of that night, I would have also asked about this, but she had passed before I was born, in a car accident. But on to what concerns me now, in the present. Ever since I was young, I've had this dream that has been of a reoccurrence for me, as it has happened multiple times, almost every year. It starts off with me in the woods, and I can feel the silence of the dark woods around me, then the sensation of being followed, and an overwhelming need to get away, to run, but then not be able to. This dream almost always ends in me getting a glimpse of eyes peering at me in every single direction. Amber eyes. I also get the exact feeling of being watched whenever I am in the woods, even though most of the times I've gone hiking or camping, nothing has gone wrong, except for one camping trip. I was with my mum, my uncle on my dad's side, and two cousins in Oregon. We had gone to a preserved hiking spot in Ainsworth Cascade Locks on August the 7th, 2013, for a 3-day adventure. It was a really fun time, and I'll never forget all the great memories I made there. But I wish I could forget this one on the second day we were there. It was getting pretty dark at that point, and I remember we had the fire going with some s'mores and etc. I had to go take a leak, so I neared the tree line to relieve myself. But when I was doing my business, I got that familiar, anxious feeling, and then turned my ears to hear that not even the crickets were chirping. After what felt like a slowly dragged out piss, I tried to hurry myself out of there when I heard my mum call my name. This calmed me for a brief moment, but I say brief because the realization of what direction that voice came from finally hit me. It came from deeper in the woods. Well, that couldn't be possible. She was back at the campfire. It then repeated again in her exact voice, the same way she had said it previously, and I'll admit, I booked it out of there like a madman back to camp. That whole ordeal ruined my call for the last day. Needless to say, I didn't bother to tell them what I'd heard because I knew I would get odd looks, and I didn't want to ruin the mood for everyone else, though I still got the odd looks after running back frantically. I guess it helps in that endeavour that they know I can be kind of paranoid when in the dark, especially in the woods. But after that, a lot of unexplained things have been happening to me, even to this day. My dog, who was in perfect health, suddenly passed without any specific reason the vet could verify. Our house burned down. My cousin became ill as well as almost lost her battle with a cancerous infection that reportedly just vanished after a week of hospitalisation. This year seems to be the worst for these misfortunes, and what follows is my paranoia, or my theory on what is the cause of all this bad luck. Well, as I already stated, my grandma passed away this year. My mum left the hospital to get her sister and come back. She was coming out of open heart surgery without a hitch and was expected to make a full recovery. But when she got back, she received a call from the hospital that her health was rapidly decreasing and that she needed to come back in immediately. That's when she called me, and I took off work to get there as well. We stayed until 1 a.m. to hear the bad news, and still, after the autopsy, the coroners say they cannot identify what the cause of her sudden health deterioration was. After that, we were all pretty distraught. The effects still carry now, especially in my mum. I've never seen her so torn up before, but I can only imagine how she feels. But not even a few days after that, I was on a business trip for work to Utah. I work for a screen printing company, and my boss, who is also my uncle, entrusted me with his trailer to go pick up an oven from a company called Workhorse. The worst part about the trip was losing this necklace that was a tooth carved from a bull skull my grandpa had given to me. It was old and I had to fix it often. I figured it must have fallen off at the motel, or maybe when I was fueling up at a checkpoint periodically to see if the oven was properly tied down. It was a pretty uneventful drive there and back, all by my lonesome. But on my way back, I saw something that has jogged these obsessive thoughts in my head to the breaking point. As the sun was setting, I was on a lonely interstate road, and I caught a glimpse of reflective eyes in the distance, looking into my direction, off the side of the ride. Me, being a superstitious type, I slowed a little, getting flashbacks of my dreams with these same exact eyes that were now looking at me. As I neared the creature, I was expecting to see a coyote or have a little giggle at my overactive imagination. But what I saw was an overly large canine, more resembling a wolf, that was pitch black. The thing was hunched over, making it look as if it was taking a dump, but had its eyes focused on me the entire time. As my truck pulled up in front of it, I noticed that something wasn't right. Its ears were on top of its head, close together, and pointed upward like a Doberman. But before I could take any more details in, it flung something at my window and darted off. The second whatever it threw made contact with my window, I screamed and floored it. What dog, wolf, or whatever it was can throw stuff at you? My God, I remember all of the thoughts going through my head. I remember even laughing a little as I felt my sanity slipping away. With no other way of getting peace of mind, I decided to visit a local psychic lady. She was going to give me a palm reading, but the instant she made contact with my hands, she shoved me away and told me to leave. The look on her face was something I will never, ever forget. Like a deer caught in the headlights, she told me there's something dark following me, and it glared at her. To me, I feel this is some sort of curse, maybe one brought on by that old shape-shifting lady back in Panama. But what really sent me over the top was about 2 months ago. My closest friend left to Oregon, but not before he and a few others of our closest friends went on a camping trip in Arizona near Sharp Creek. Everything was fine. We picked a spot far secluded from other campers, went fishing and saw some of the wildlife there. But as it started to get darker, our friend, who I'll dub M, realised she must have dropped her car keys on one of the trails we were walking. And so she begged for the three of us to accompany her on a search for them. We were pretty angry at the time and the fact that she had lost them, considering she was our driver in all of this, and we had already begun boozing things up. But no matter, we grabbed out our flashlights just in case and began going down the trail. It really seemed pretty futile. Before long, it would be dark, and the task of finding such a small item in the dark be like trying to find a needle in a haystack, so you could imagine the despair we were all feeling. Well, after about half an hour of fruitless and aggravativity, meaningless searching, we began to stop and try to get Em to recollect where she'd last had even the slightest contact with them. But that's when, in our only moment of composure, we noticed the eerie silence that had fallen while we stomped throughout the now pitch black woods. I think we all grew uneasy at the time, because all of us just started looking at each other, knowing something definitely wasn't right. In the back of my head, a cynical thought of all the times for this shit to happen, as if I already knew what was about to occur. I just thought to myself, can't even catch a break. But as soon as that thought slipped through my mind, we heard a whistle from directly ahead of us on the trail. This snapped all of our heads into that direction, but as if on cue, a high-pitched squeal followed by a thud and a gust of wind from directly behind us happened. When we all darted around, Em was nowhere to be found, just her flashlight on the ground. I began to panic first as the others began screaming for her, and my best friend, who I'll call C, ran into the woods directly to the right of us without a word of warning. I flipped and screamed after him, knowing this could be the last thing he does, and I went to grab him, but ended up fumbling over him as we both tumbled down the incline from the trail. I got knocked pretty good, so it took me a second to regain my composure. When I came to, C was already standing up, staring off ahead of us, but remaining dead silent. I then looked up to see M just knelt over by a tree, facing it and quivering about 5 yards off or so. We rushed over to her, shaking her and asking her what had happened, but she just remained silent, her eyes nearly popping out of her head and as white as a ghost. That was when we heard it. It was a shrill but very apparently cackle. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw 2 piercing amber eyes coming from about 10 yards away from us, and I didn't even need to see more to determine that we needed to leave as soon as possible. The level at which those eyes were at, they were higher up than me, so whatever was looking at us was easily 7 to 8 feet tall. I'm 6'2", so seeing this struck me, and immediately danger alerts within every core of my body. I quickly but calmly urged C to just grab her and go right now, but he had to persist in trying to figure out what had happened to her. He hadn't noticed that we were being watched yet, but before I could even tell him of what I was seeing, the eyes began to lower and blink a little before rumbling in my chest began to occur. The very moment I felt it, I was beginning to become nauseous, and from that rumbling came the most bone-chilling growl I have ever heard. C felt it, and heard it too, because I saw his head jolt towards the beast as if he was a deer. M also looked over and began to scream hysterically. The alert in my head rang even more so now, because she just gave it a reason to come after us. I quickly ran over and grabbed her, picking her up off the ground, only to have her scream even louder in my ear and push me away and start running off back towards the incline. I heard heavy footfall and C scream out with a curse like a frightened teenager before momentarily looking back to see it charging out of the bush and towards us in such an aggressive manner. It was snorting and snarling with such hatred I pissed myself right there and then, and started hauling ass after M and C, fast behind me. I saw it for a brief moment, but without a doubt, the silhouette I saw registered in my mind as the same entity that I saw on my trip back from Utah. My friend, who had apparently waited like a chicken shit back up at the trail, had noticed us clearing through the brush up towards the incline. He looked at first surprised, and I bet went to ask us what had happened, before I'm sure he indeed saw it too. His jaw dropped as he screamed more like a girl than M, and took off back down the trail before us, and soon we followed suit. I dare not turn around, but I knew it had to have been following us, even on the trail, because I heard a loud impact on the trail, as if a large mass just fell from the sky upon it, followed by the heavy gait of the beast's footfalls. We tore past our campsite and to our car, stopping only when we noticed the beast had apparently quit trailing us. And the fact that we had no way to even start the car, none of us knew how to hotwire cars either, yet we figured it'd be the safest place away from the woods and out in the open. A notion, I'm sure, would have made zero difference if it wanted to kill us. Hell, it could have had us any time if it wanted. But when we broke the tree line and out to the dirt lot and saw the car, the fear that we felt only grew. There, on the hood of the car, lay an elk's severed head, fresh, and there was something inside of its mouth. As we approached closer, to our relief, it was M's keys. M and C were hysterical with questions, but nonetheless anxious to leave. I grew aggravated and deranged because the thought of it toying with us like that infuriated me. So, I threw the head of the elk off the hood. But that is when I noticed something else that caught my attention. In its antlers that fell to the ground, I knelt over to pick it up, but stopped midway, noticing that it was my necklace that I had lost during my work trip to Utah. Ever since that day, the nightmares have returned, and more frequently. I've fallen out of contact with M and C since, and this has left me feeling completely hopeless. I have no idea what I'm dealing with, but this is, in its own right, is providing some relief for me. To at least be able to tell someone who is as open-minded as yourself. Again, I really appreciate you letting me send you this, because I'm honestly scared of what might happen if this thing will find me. I hadn't told you of what happened to M and my loss in that last entry. The reason I fell out of contact with my 3 friends from that day, after M had gotten her keys and we all got into the car. We finally did get an answer as to what happened to her, but a vague one at that. All she could recall was a numbness and total black and a feeling like she was just thrown through the air like a baseball. Next thing she knew, when she came to, she was where we found her, but she was utterly petrified and couldn't move because of the crippling fear. When we were younger, I told C, and only him, about my dreams and the amber eyes. I don't know if he ever took me seriously before, but I think maybe he did after that. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed that story there. Absolutely shocking when I received this back on Monday, and I've been speaking, as I say, throughout the week with my anonymous encounter. Really nice guy, people. Very honest, was happy to answer all questions. But of course, please do let us know what you think down below. Of course, please do like and share. This guy's encounter and the entire story that he sent to me really is, in my opinion, one of the most heartbreaking, interesting, and I can't thank him enough for choosing to share it with me. Yes, I'm aware that there are elements within the story that some might find questionable, but I can assure, after speaking with him extensively throughout this week, he has shown nothing but sincerity, pure worries, and true and utter fear, and above all, a need for questions to be answered. Any questions that I have asked of him is answered without delay, and again, I can't thank him enough for that. I have recommended that he seek the help of a shaman blessing to his home, himself, and if possible, close family members as well. And I sincerely hope that it will be a step towards closing this chapter of his life. Again, everybody, please do let us know down below in the comments. Please do like and share. If you haven't subscribed to DMT, please smash that subscribe button. We are so close to 2,000 subscribers. Your support is really welcome, and I absolutely appreciate it. Remember, guys, above all, be safe, not sorry.